Hi, welcome to the Culture Curators Podcast. We're here to share insights, information, and resources to help you become a more effective salon and business leader. Hey everybody, welcome back. We're really excited about this next podcast because we're talking about cancellation policies. Do you have a cancellation policy? Do you not have a cancellation policy? If you have a cancellation policy, do you adhere to it consistently? Those are big questions.
They are big questions, and it seems like they've gotten bigger since the pandemic,
Absolutely.
right? It seems like cancellations have accelerated across the industry. We definitely hear that as a general consensus. This has always been an important topic and a bit of a controversial one because not everyone agrees on one, way to do it. But it's definitely something that we wanted to discuss and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you do have a cancellation policy, I kind of want to take a step back and ask you, what is your cancellation policy and when did you develop it? Did you develop it pre-pandemic or post-pandemic? Did you have it in writing? Are all your clients notified? Have they signed off on it? Because I think the first thing that you have to do is establish what the policy actually is. And it's really easy to establish a policy or be like all in the office, like I'm really going to enforce this and I'm doggone it. I'm going to, have them pay 50%, 100% if they don't meet my criteria. It's super easy to talk a big talk in the office, but when you get out and you have to actually enforce it, oftentimes we see it becoming inconsistent with enforcement.
I agree, and I think a lot of times it comes down to how you view your relationships with your clients a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times too, it's like when you set a policy in place, are you willing to have a policy that is within reason is a great question to ask yourself. And consumers want to see reasonable business practices from a business that they consistently patronize, especially when it's a small business like a hair salon, right? They still want to even see that with Amazon and Apple and Best Buy or whatever, you know what I mean? But even that much more with a small business in a small town, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we're advocates of some sort of cancellation policy. I think more what is the challenge is what's the consequence for a client breaking the cancellation policy. So in other words, it's quite common for people to say there's a 48-hour or 24-hour window if you need to change or move your appointment. What's going to happen if I call up day of and I'm really sick? Are you going to charge me whatever your cancellation policy is? Or are you going to give me a hall pass, so to speak, a free pass? What if it happens again? What if the next time I call, my son happens to be sick and I have to go pick him up from school and I'm a single parent? Am I going to be charged?
Yeah.
And how does that land for a client?
Yeah, and you could go down 15 other scenarios.
Absolutely.
What happens
probably 100.
If my boss just called me and literally my work schedule was shifted and it just happened right now. So I didn't have the luxury of notifying you within the window of your required cancellation policy. Clients want to see, are you reasonable? So even let's say that there's an exchange policy that you have for retail, mm-hmm. and it's, a 2-week policy, but it happens to be the 3rd, 4th week. Do you make that exception? Do you not? Again, that's up to you as a business owner if you're going to take a hard line stance on things. But I think what you have to ask yourself is am I willing to lose the client over this? That's Absolutely. A really important question.
Yeah, because ultimately when I tried, and I say tried to enforce my cancellation policy, and I called people to try and get them to pay, inevitably I lost a client.
Right.
For the salon and for my team member. And so it's to what extent do you want to hold true to whatever your cancellation policy is? And I just think that it's really important to take a really serious look at what are you willing to enforce and what are you willing to gain and what are you willing to lose when you're developing or defining what your cancellation policy is.
Yeah, and I think in 2024, the reality is the only way you're ever going to even think to enforce a cancellation policy is by keeping a credit card on file. So your system or your software has to have that ability, because like Jill just mentioned back in the day, it's like trying to call that, it's like chasing the money down. Now it's like, it's super negative.
In some states, you can't have the credit card on file.
True.
And so you have to really check with your state local authorities to make sure that you can. Most states can, but there are still some states that can't. And so it's
gonna be that much harder to enforce it with them, right?
I never once got a credit card over the phone.
Right.
You know, it just
now
never
you're playing
happened.
phone tag. And
Yeah. They know why you're calling.
Exactly. And that's the thing too. I don't want it to ever become a negative between, the brand and the client. Now, that's not 100% avoidable. There are going to be challenges that happen. There are going to be clients that aren't the right fit, which is also why, and by the way, there are going to be clients that take advantage. So that's also why we believe in having some sort of policy in place. Yes, but huge advocates of doing it within reason. And when we talk about the way that Jill ran her salon when she had it, the way that I try to run mine when it comes to cancellation policy, I want to make clients know that we don't want to charge you for services that we didn't do on you. Like, that doesn't feel good for us either. But what we are asking is that you adhere to the policy when and if at all possible. And what you can do to be reasonable is offer people a one-time courtesy. And then if they become a repeat offender, well, then you have to enforce it and you have to follow through. And this also can sometimes create a disconnect or a little bit of a butting of the heads between owner and stylist, one way or the other, right? Some stylists want the client to be charged. Some stylists are like, no, I don't want my client to be charged. There's a lot of different feelings around this.
Yeah, there absolutely is, and not only with that, but it's also with services. Mm-hmm. So if you have a half-hour service and you get a late cancellation, it's 30 minutes. If you have a 4-hour service and you get a late cancellation, it's a whole different ballgame. That could be anywhere from half to 3/4 of your day, and so do you take a look at the cancellation policy in regards to the amount of time booked out or the services? I don't know that there's a right and a wrong or a clear-cut answer to those questions, but it's just thought-provoking questions that we want to raise so that you can take a look at your cancellation policy and determine what's going to work best for you. We have some salons that we work with that are extension-only salons. So their services are all quite long. We have others that might be only cut or blow dry, and those services are much shorter.
Yeah, and I think also it depends on the state of the business. If you have a huge operation and a large team, 1 or 2 cancellations it's not affecting you as much as when it's a small operation that maybe is in a weaker space, or in a more challenging time for their business possibly. I also think that suite owners are heavily affected by this because it's just you. So if you lose 4 hours of your day, there's no wiggle room for that. And obviously when it's last minute, even if you have a cancellation list, or a waiting list, the reality is, a lot of people can't be like, all right, I can drop everything I'm doing right now and be there in an hour or 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a really controversial subject, and especially now, in 2024. We'd be really curious to know what your thoughts are around cancellation policy. Do you have a cancellation policy? Do you not? Do you have a hard time enforcing it? Is it maybe because the penalties are too great? Would it make more sense to reduce the penalties so that people know that you're serious, but it doesn't break the bank?
Right.
I would just love to hear from you and what it is that you think about it and what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think, that's what's so great about having a podcast. When we post this on YouTube, comment on this. Tell us what you think. Like, comment, share. Let's get the interaction kind of going so that we can really talk about this collectively, because I think this is a phenomenal conversation for commission owners to have together because it's a universal issue. And it's also, I was listening, I think we talked about this the other day. I was listening to a Jeff Bezos interview, and he was saying how people are always asking him, like, what's about to change? What's the next big change coming? And he said, he likes to kind of flip that. And he says people ask that all the time, but he's like, I want to ask what's not going to change.
Right.
like what's going to stay consistent and stay the same? What are people going to consistently always want? And so I'm bringing that up because cancellations in a hair salon will never change. They will always happen. So we have to navigate through them and I think evolve the way that we think about cancellation policies, how we enforce them. But again, I think not having anything is also not a great thing because you're leaving yourself out to, be very vulnerable.
Absolutely. And there is a sense of protection for your employees and protecting them and their time. And so I am totally in favor of a cancellation policy and really making it fit for your business, and whatever that looks like is what it looks like. And work with your coach and see what they have to say, and they can analyze it. And what's really great is that they can take that step away because they're not in the business. It's not their bottom line, so to speak. And so they can really look with a different set of eyes, a different perspective, perhaps, when you take a look at the cancellation policy. And they can offer you suggestions, recommendations. And then, of course, it's up to you whether or not you want to change your policy or continue to do what you're doing. You're the captain of your own ship.
I have a question for you. What do you think about when, let's say you do enforce a cancellation policy, you do charge the client? What about when they do a credit card dispute?
That's really, really hard. And that's 2024. Welcome to 2024 because it's happening. We hear it happening all the time.
The credit card company is going to side with them, right?
The credit card company will side with them. And so here's the deal, guys. You have to have it in writing. You have to have your every client initial that it is in order for it to hold up with your credit card company. And so if you have those things, okay, that's great. If you don't, you have to go back to the drawing board and you're going to have to establish a way in which to get every single client to initial the policy saying that they have read it, they understand it, and move forward with that.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about and unpack. So we hope that you really enjoyed, got some insight, maybe raised some great questions that you can reanalyze, discuss, and again, comment on it. Let's get the conversation going.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Culture Curators Podcast. Please like, comment, follow, and subscribe.